welcome to today's deep dive. If you're joining us right now, I want you to prepare yourself because the journey we are embarking on today is fundamentally unlike anything we've explored before.
Yeah, it really is.
Our core mission for this deep dive is to unpack a piece of literature that is utterly fascinating and just incredibly dizzying.
Yeah.
And to be completely honest, it's deeply haunting.
Absolutely.
We are looking at a story that sits right at this jagged intersection of true crime, historical cover-up, and genuine supernatural dread.
Right.
And I am so glad you are here with us, listener, because this is one of those topics where the ground just keeps shifting beneath your feet.
It really does. It never lets you settle.
No, it doesn't. We have a thick stack of excerpts from a truly remarkable source today. It's David Peace's novel, Occupied City.
Yes.
But right off the bat, I need to make something absolutely clear to you. This is not just a standard mystery.
Not at all.
It is not a conventional historical novel that, holds your hand through a timeline.
Right, it doesn't do that.
The way this information is presented, the way the history is unpacked, is entirely unique and requires us to look at it through a very specific lens.
It really does.
Yeah.
What we're looking at in these sources is a highly avant-garde retelling of a real, infamous, and frankly, completely devastating historical event.
Devastating is the word, yeah.
It's known as the Taikoku Bank Incident, or the Teigin Incident, which took place in Tokyo in 1948.
Right.
But what makes this source material so compelling is that it doesn't just give us a dry, chronological play-by-play of police reports.
Which would be the standard way to do it.
Exactly. Instead, the entire narrative is structured around a traditional Japanese ghost storytelling game called Heiaku Monogatari Kaidankai.
That is just such a wild framing device.
It is. And to really understand the depth of the material we have in front of us, you have to understand this framing device. It changes how you process every single piece of information we're about to discuss.
Okay, let's unpack this right away. How exactly does this ghost story game work? Because just hearing the name, it immediately sets a very specific, very eerie tone for the listener. It sounds like something designed to actively blur the line between reality and the supernatural.
That is precisely what it's designed to do. It's a parlor game with roots going all the way back to the Edo period.
Okay.
Originally, it was conceived as a test of courage for samurai. A way to harden their nerves.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but it later became widely popular with commoners. The premise is brilliantly simple, but psychologically intense.
Paint the picture for us.
People gather together in a room at twilight. They light exactly 100 pale blue candles, and they take turns telling tales of supernatural horror, local legends, or terrifying personal encounters.
Pale blue candles. That's a great detail.
Right. And after each tale is finished, the storyteller leans over and blows out one single candle.
So it's getting darker.
Exactly. As the stories progress over hours, the room becomes incrementally dimmer, gloomier, and colder.
That's terrifying.
The belief underpinning the game is that as the physical light fades, the stories themselves act as a kind of incantation.
A summoning ritual, almost.
Precisely. When the 100th tale is told and the final candle is extinguished, the room is plunged into complete darkness. And at that precise moment of total blackness, real ghouls, demons, or supernatural entities are believed to physically appear in the room, conjured into existence by the sheer concentrated terror of the tales.
I love that concept so much. It's such a brilliant, atmospheric way to frame a true crime story.
It frames the horror perfectly.
Because this incident isn't just about facts, dates, and timelines. It's about the lingering ghosts of history. It's about the trauma that permanently stains a city.
Yes, perfectly said.
In our deep dive today, we're going to explore specific candles, which in this source material act as individual distinct testimonies.
Plunging you, the listener, right into a freezing, muddy, and profoundly traumatized occupied Tokyo.
And here's where it gets really interesting, and this is the hook I want you to keep firmly in the back of your mind as we go through this deep dive.
Right, the main thread.
Imagine surviving a horrific mass poisoning, dealing with the trauma of watching your colleagues die, only to slowly realize that the police might be actively framing the wrong man for the crime.
The injustice of that is just staggering.
It is. And while that localized injustice is happening, a massive global superpower is deliberately hiding the real culprits to steal their horrifying world-ending secrets.
Yeah, it just expands outwards.
It's a local true crime that balloons terrifyingly fast into a geopolitical conspiracy.
And that escalation is exactly why this source material is so vital to examine. We're going to look at these different testimonies, impartially stepping into the perspectives of the victims, the investigators, and the occupiers.
Right.
The sources touch on deeply complex political actions, like the maneuvers of the U.S. military, the occupation forces, and the desperate Japanese authorities.
And we should state clearly for the listener.
Yes, I want to emphasize to you that we're not here to endorse the viewpoints of these characters or to take political sides.
Exactly. We are entirely neutral here.
We are simply unpacking the historical narrative and the thematic concepts contained within the original source material. We're observing the mechanics of how a society fractures when the truth is actively suppressed by those in power.
Exactly. We are just following the light of the candles. So let's step into that dark room.
Let's do it.
The first candle is lit. Our deep dive begins with the very first testimony in the text, and it is instantly striking because it is a collective voice.
Yes, it's a chorus.
It's the synchronized voice of the 12 dead victims. Let me set the scene for you, because the atmosphere is crucial to understanding why this crime happened the way it did.
The setting is everything.
It is January 26, 1948. It's a miserable, bone-chilling, sleety day in Tokyo.
That's awful weather.
The city is still physically and psychologically devastated, right? It's occupied by Allied forces following the end of World War II.
Still reeling from the bombings.
We are at the Shinamachi branch of the Teikoku Bank. It's just a regular, mundane Monday afternoon. The bank staff are working. They're cold. They're tired. They are thinking about going home to whatever rations and warmth they can find.
Right, was surviving.
But they can't leave early because the snow has turned to a heavy, freezing sleet, and the bank must stay open. And right around closing time, specifically at 3:20 p.m., a man arrives at the side door of the bank.
Yes, and this arrival is where the methodology of the crime becomes so crucial to analyze.
It's so calculated.
It is. The man presents himself immediately as an authority figure. He claims to be a doctor. He presents an official-looking name card to the staff that reads, Dr. Yamaguchi Jiro, Technical Officer, Ministry of Health and Welfare.
A very official title.
He speaks with a calm authority and tells the assistant manager that he has been dispatched by a Lieutenant Parker of the U.S. Occupation Forces.
Dropping a name like that is huge.
Now, what's fascinating here is the absolute psychological precision of the killer's approach. He leverages two massive, unshakable pillars of control in 1948 Tokyo.
Let's hear them.
First, the absolute, unquestionable authority of the U.S. occupation. In that era, you simply did not question an order from the Americans or anyone acting on their behalf.
You just wouldn't dare.
Exactly. Second, he taps into a very real, very terrifying and constant public fear, which is an outbreak of infectious disease.
A huge fear at that time.
He calmly informs the staff that there is an outbreak of dysentery linked to a local well in the neighborhood, and that, unfortunately, an infected person had visited this very bank branch earlier that day.
Right. And what makes this so incredibly effective is that the bank manager had actually just gone home sick with a terrible stomachache earlier that same afternoon.
The timing is just unbelievable.
So the staff were already primed for this narrative. They're already quietly terrified that they've caught whatever the manager has.
It validates their internal fears.
The context makes the intruder's lie completely believable. The killer arrives wearing a white cloth armband that clearly designates him as the leader of disinfecting team or disease preventative doctor.
He looks the part.
He looks official. He's perfectly calm. He is wearing a sharp lounge suit. The survivors later describe him as handsome professional and carrying a heavy metal medical box.
Very clinical.
He is the very picture of state-sanctioned authority arriving to save them from a terrifying invisible disease.
Precisely. He takes total control of the room without ever raising his voice. He gathers all 16 people who happen to be in the bank around the assistant manager's desk.
All 16 of them.
This group includes the bank employees, the building's caretaker, and tragically, even the caretaker's wife and 2 young children.
Oh man, that's so hard to read.
It is. An 8-year-old boy and a 16-year-old girl who just happened to be there.
Wrong place, wrong time.
He tells this gathered group that they must all take a specialized preventative medicine provided directly by the American forces, and they must do it immediately before a larger, heavily equipped disinfecting team arrives to sanitize the building.
Creating that false sense of urgency.
And then he initiates this incredibly chilling, highly methodical poisoning protocol.
Let's walk through that protocol because reading the source material, it is agonizing to witness the precision of it.
Agonizing is the perfect word.
The text purposefully lists the exact names and ages of all the victims. Takuchi Tsujiro Watanabe Yoshiyasu, the 8-year-old boy Takizawa Yoshihiro,
Grounding it in reality.
which serves to constantly remind you, the reader, that these are flesh-and-blood human beings, not just historical statistics.
Yes.
So the quote-unquote doctor opens his metal box. He uses a glass pipette to meticulously distribute a clear liquid from a bottle marked First Drug in English into the teacups that the bank staff have provided.
The use of English text on the bottle is a subtle touch of authority, too.
Exactly. But he doesn't just hand out the cups and tell them to drink. He issues a very specific, very clinical warning.
Agreed, the tooth enamel warning.
He tells them the medicine is incredibly strong and highly acidic, so much so that it will permanently damage the enamel on their teeth if it touches them directly.
Which is a lie, of course.
A total lie. So he demonstrates a highly specific, unnatural technique for drinking it. He instructs them to put their tongue out over their bottom front teeth, tuck it firmly under the lower lip, drip the liquid directly onto the back of the tongue, and violently tilt their heads back to swallow it straight down the throat in one gulp.
If we look at this through the lens of criminal psychology and behavioral control, we can see exactly why this elaborate theater worked so flawlessly.
It's terrifyingly smart.
The complex, highly specific instructions served multiple critical purposes. First, and most practically, it masked the intensely bitter, burning taste of the poison by forcing it past the taste buds as quickly as possible.
So they wouldn't spit it out.
Exactly. Second, and much more importantly, it forced extreme cognitive concentration.
Oh, that's interesting.
The victims were so intensely focused on following the doctor's precise physical instructions to protect their teeth that their critical thinking was entirely bypassed.
They weren't thinking about the liquid at all.
Right. They weren't questioning the liquid itself, only their ability to follow the procedure. It created a collective synchronized action.
Everyone drank at once.
Everyone swallowed the poison at the exact same moment. No one had the opportunity to take a small sip, react poorly, and warn the others to stop.
Wow.
And then the killer simply stands there. He looks at his wristwatch. He waits exactly 60 seconds, no more, no less, before administering what he calls the second drug, which was, in all likelihood, just plain water, intended to wash the poison down into the stomach.
The aftermath described in the text is just absolute chaotic horror.
It really is.
Almost immediately after taking the second drug, the doctor tells them they can go and rinse their mouths out at the sink. And that's when the burning starts.
The reality sets in.
The victims described feeling an agonizing sensation like they had just swallowed boiling strong whiskey. They drop the cups. They rush for the small sink in the back room. They are coughing, retching, vomiting.
There's a little panic.
Panic sets in as they fall over each other, trying to get to the single water tap, and one by one they begin to collapse onto the floor into a comatose state. The light just rapidly fades from them.
It's brutal.
And the author David Peace writes this section from a perspective that is profoundly haunting. It's written from the collective voice of the dead, trapped in this purgatorial, shadowy, gray place, situated somewhere between what they call the occupied city of the living and the posthumous city of the dead.
This literary framing is truly what elevates the source material far beyond standard true crime recounting.
It's so poetic but dark.
The victims are directly speaking to the writer, and by extension, they're speaking directly to you, the listener.
Breaking the fourth wall.
They describe being in their cheap, hastily constructed wooden coffins covered in the sleet and mud of the graveyard, and they are weeping.
Yeah.
But beneath the sorrow, they are fiercely angry. They repeatedly ask these piercing, uncomfortable questions. Do we matter to you? Did we ever matter? Are we just evidence at a crime scene?
That gave me chills reading it.
They accuse the narrative and the audience of only knowing them by the aggregate number 12. 12, you will always write 12. Reduced to a number.
Stripping away their humanity.
They are actively challenging the entire true crime genre's tendency to commodify death. They're demanding that you view history not just as a fascinating puzzle to be solved from the comfort of the present, but as a visceral tragedy of stolen, vibrant lives.
They don't want to just be a clue in a mystery.
No. They're trapped endlessly in the moment of their death, forever experiencing that horrific 3:20 p.m. on a Monday, waiting for someone to hear their actual individual voices.
It's a heavy burden to place on the reader, but it's incredibly effective.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for the actual investigation?
Right, to transition.
The first candle is blown out, plunging us deeper into the dark, and the perspective shifts drastically. We move to the second candle, which is the testimony, or rather the meticulous, frustrating notebook of Detective H from the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Board's First Investigative Division Room Number 2, which is essentially the murder room.
The murder room.
And the contrast here is completely jarring. We go from the poetic, agonizing, ethereal voices of the dead to the blunt, frustrated, aggressively administrative notes of a cop trying to solve a seemingly impossible crime.
The scope of the police mobilization detailed in this detective's notebook is staggering.
Huge.
You have to understand, this was a crime that completely paralyzed and shocked the entire nation of Japan.
Everyone was terrified.
Initially, 100 top detectives are assigned to the case. Eventually, as the desperation grows, 20,000 officers are mobilized nationwide.
20,000, that is massive.
The police take the unprecedented step of distributing a composite sketch of the suspect based on the survivor's hazy descriptions. The source explicitly notes this is the very first time a composite sketch was ever used and distributed to the public in Japanese police history.
Wow, a historical first born out of pure desperation.
They also quickly rely on scientific analysis, figuring out that the poison wasn't standard potassium cyanide as they had initially suspected, but a highly specialized, incredibly lethal cyanic silver compound.
Which points to a specific type of killer.
This tells them something crucial. The killer was highly experienced in handling volatile, dangerous drugs. This was no amateur.
But despite all these massive resources, despite the science and the manpower, the reality of the daily police work, what they call G-Doherty, or door-to-door questioning, is just soul-crushing.
It's relentless.
The detective's notes are a repetitive litany of profound frustration. He writes day after day, waste of time. Same neighborhoods, same streets, same houses, same doors, same faces, same waste of time.
You really feel his fatigue.
You can vividly picture them out in the snow, the rain, the freezing sleet, their shoes ruined, asking the exact same questions to thousands of exhausted citizens who know absolutely nothing.
Searching for a needle in a haystack.
You can feel the physical exhaustion and the immense institutional pressure melting on these detectives. They need a tangible lead desperately, and then finally they get one, the name card.
The trail of the name card is arguably the most fascinating and definitely the most grueling investigative thread detailed in the source material.
Let's get into it.
Through cross-referencing, the police realized that Teikoku Bank wasn't an isolated incident. There were two previous, thankfully non-lethal incidents at other banks where a man used a very similar disinfecting ruse but failed to convince the staff to drink the liquid.
Practice runs, basically.
In one of those earlier incidents at the Yasuda Bank, the man made a critical error. He left his name card behind on the counter, and that card read, Dr. Matsui Shigeru, Health and Welfare Ministry.
Okay, let's unpack this name card lead because the direction it takes is wild. The police actually tracked down the real Dr. Matsui Shigeru.
Right, he's a real person.
He's alive, he's perfectly well, and he's living in Sendai. He immediately comes to the police voluntarily when he hears his name associated with the crime.
He wants to clear his name.
And it turns out this Dr. Matsui is perhaps the most meticulous record-keeping man on the planet.
He really is.
He proves to the police that he had exactly 100 name cards printed in March of 1947. Furthermore, he kept a small black-bound notebook where he meticulously recorded the name, date, and location of every single person he ever gave a card to.
That is incredible.
And he kept every single card he received in exchange. The records show he exchanged exactly 128 cards.
This revelation sets off one of the most tedious, painstaking investigative tasks imaginable.
I can't even imagine.
The detectives are literally assigned to track down all 128 people scattered across the country who received a card from Dr. Matsui.
Just brutal police work.
We are talking about detectives traveling by slow-freezing post-war trains to different towns, visiting different rural police stations, just to knock on doors and ask these specific individuals to produce the physical card Dr. Matsui gave them months ago.
And the logic here is straightforward.
The investigative logic is incredibly simple, but requires monumental effort. If you cannot produce the card, you become a prime suspect, because you might be the killer who accidentally left it on the counter at the Yasuda Bank.
Right.
And slowly, agonizingly, day by day, they cross names off the list, they find the cards, until one file stands out glaringly. A man named Hirasawa Sadamichi.
Hirasawa Sadamichi. He is a 57-year-old, relatively well-respected temper painter. He even has some distant connections to the imperial family.
He's an established figure.
He confirms to the police that he met Dr. Matsui on a ferry, and they did indeed exchange cards. But when asked to physically produce the card, Hirasawa claims his wallet was stolen by a pickpocket months earlier at a crowded train station.
A very convenient excuse.
He says the thief took his money, his identification, and all his name cards, including Matsui's.
And this seemingly convenient excuse raises a glaring red flag for the detectives. Is he telling the truth? Detective H digs intensely into the specific alibi.
He pulls on the thread.
He discovers that Hirasawa had indeed reported the pickpocketing to a local police box at the time it supposedly happened. But as the detective pulls on the thread, he finds out Hirasawa lied about several key details in that initial report.
Oh, really? Like what?
For instance, Hirasawa claimed the thief left a distinctive fan in his pocket after taking the wallet. The detective meticulously tracks down the origin of the fan and proves it was actually given to Hirasawa's own daughter by a local ice vendor.
Wow, so he caught him in a lie.
The pickpocket story, the core of his alibi, is a proven fabrication.
Not only that, but the financial evidence surrounding Hirasawa is incredibly damning.
Oh, the money is highly suspicious.
In December, just weeks before the poisoning, Hirasawa was completely flat broke. He was reduced to borrowing small amounts of money from friends just to buy a cheap secondhand wardrobe.
Destitute, basically.
But right after the Tokoku Bank incident, where the killer successfully stole over 160,000 yen from the desks while the victims were dying, Hirasawa suddenly deposits massive sums of money into his own account and his wife's account.
That is impossible to ignore.
He literally hands his wife 80,000 yen in crisp cash. When questioned, he lies about where the money came from. He's highly evasive, and even his own family members tell the police they are deeply suspicious of his sudden wealth.
It looks really bad for him.
From Detective H's perspective, standing in the cold, dealing with public outrage, Hirasawa looks incredibly, undeniably guilty.
But we have to step back and analyze the detective's mindset here as revealed in his notebook. As the pages progress, you see a terrifying, blinding tunnel vision begin to develop.
Confirmation bias.
The detective wants it to be Hirasawa. He becomes utterly obsessed with making the pieces fit. The text of his notebook repeatedly uses the phrase, kuro kuro, blacker and blacker, guiltier and guiltier.
He's convincing himself.
The detective is actively forcing the narrative to conform to his chosen suspect. In doing so, he completely ignores glaring physical discrepancy.
Right, like the age gap.
Exactly. The surviving bank employees explicitly, consistently describe the killer as being around 40 years old. Hirasawa is nearly 60 and looks his age.
That's a huge difference.
Other detectives in the precinct point out that the composite sketch looks absolutely nothing like him. But Detective H aggressively dismisses their concerns.
It is a textbook case of pure, unadulterated confirmation bias. The second candle ends with a genuinely terrifying moment. The detective is speaking directly to the writer, screaming defensively in justification of his investigation.
He loses it.
He shouts, "I will give you tears, you dog. You deceitful, lying dog." He did it. He did it. And you should thank me.
It's chilling.
It completely exposes a pursuit of a conviction that has become completely divorced from an objective search for the truth. He doesn't care about the age difference. He doesn't care about the sketch.
He just needs it to be over.
He just desperately needs the case closed. He needs the suffocating public pressure to stop, and Hirasawa is the scapegoat he has chosen.
Which transitions us perfectly and tragically into the third candle. If the detective's notebook is an exploration of the cold mechanics of a biased, desperate investigation, the third candle is about the agonizing, lifelong emotional fallout of that investigation.
The human cost.
This is the testimony of a young female bank teller who survived the poisoning. And the unbearable burden of her survival is the core beating heart of this segment.
Her testimony is incredibly heart-wrenching to read. She wakes up every single day in what she calls the occupied city, feeling a deep, pervasive sense that something is wrong.
Survivor's guilt.
She says she only survived through sheer dumb luck. Perhaps she didn't drink the entirety of the cup, or perhaps her body reacted differently, and she is constantly haunted by the imagined accusing voices of her dead colleagues whispering to her, "Those who survive are stronger."
That's devastating.
Her tragic refrain throughout the entire text is, "I am the survivor. I hate myself." She is dealing with profound, debilitating PTSD. Every Monday, she physically and mentally relives the trauma. She walks through the mud and the sleet, reliving the exact moment the killer walked confidently through the door.
Her fundamental understanding of reality has been shattered. The combination of the foreign occupation and the sheer intimacy of the crime have broken her trust in the basic building blocks of a functioning society.
Nothing is safe anymore.
She articulates this perfectly. Until yesterday, I thought a cup was a cup. I thought the war was over. But the war is not over. A cup is not a cup. Medicine is not medicine. A doctor is a murderer.
Wow.
She truly believed she was finally safe because the nation had surrendered and the bombs had stopped falling, but the violence simply changed its shape and walked right through the front door of her bank wearing a crisp white coat.
And here is where it gets really interesting regarding the police investigation we just unpacked. Despite her trauma, she has one crucial, absolutely undeniable detail etched permanently into her memory.
The face?
When the killer was pouring the poison from the pipette, she was sitting close enough to look him directly in the face. She tells the police with absolute certainty, "I will never forget that face. I would know it anywhere."
And she's very specific about it.
She describes its geometry vividly. She says it was very round, like an egg.
So when the police finally make their move and arrest the painter, Hirasawa, they turn it into a massive public spectacle.
A media circus.
They parade him through the train station in front of massive, angry crowds, trying to cement his guilt in the public eye. And then they bring him into a stark interrogation room, and they force this young, traumatized survivor to look at him through a window.
To make the official identification.
They want her to identify him. They need her to point the finger and definitively close the case.
But she looks at Hirasawa, she studies him, and she outright refuses.
She holds her ground.
She tells the detectives, "This man is not the killer. The killer had a round face. That man in that room has a square face. Very square, like a box. He's also too old. He's not the killer."
A box versus an egg. It's definitive.
Yes, he's resolute. She knows what she saw. But the pressure she faces from the state is unimaginable. The police don't accept her answer. They bring her back into that room 3 separate times, aggressively trying to break her down, trying to convince her that her memory is faulty.
What's truly fascinating and deeply disturbing here is the specific social pressure they apply. The detectives tell her that another survivor, her own trusted colleague, Mr. Tanaka, has already sworn that Hirasawa is the killer.
Pitting the survivors against each other.
They are actively weaponizing her peer against her, trying to isolate her in her own memory. The police desperately want her to conform to the consensus, to just agree so they can get their conviction and go home.
Take the easy way out.
They imply she's being difficult, unpatriotic, even by holding up justice. But she adamantly refuses to lie. She holds tightly to her truth, even though it completely alienates her from the police and her colleagues.
Her life after the incident is a constant, suffocating struggle. She eventually marries a journalist named Takuchi Ricci. Now, this is an incredibly chilling detail that highlights her vulnerability.
This part is so unsettling.
Ricci originally gained access to her in the hospital right after the poisoning by wearing a white coat and pretending to be a medical doctor, telling her he was there to help her.
It's an exact echo of the crime.
It's a deeply eerie, disturbing echo of the killer's exact ruse. But she marries him anyway, perhaps hoping he can protect her, hoping he can save her from the endless nightmare of the occupied city.
But he can't.
But he can't. She remains forever haunted. She knows Hirasawa eventually confessed under extreme duress, but she knows in her very soul that he didn't do it, which prompts you, the listener, to wonder, if Hirasawa isn't the killer and the survivors know he isn't the killer, who is?
Right.
Who's actually walking free while an innocent painter sits on death row?
That incredibly heavy question blows out the third candle and lights the fourth. And this, as you said earlier, is the massive aha moment of the entire deep dive.
The geopolitical shift.
The narrative completely shifts away from the mud of Tokyo, away from the Japanese police and the traumatized survivors. We enter the sterile, highly classified world of geopolitics and military intelligence.
A completely different arena.
The fourth candle consists of a series of dead letters written by an American, Lieutenant Colonel Murray Thompson. He is a medical doctor and a high-level biological warfare expert stationed out of Camp Detrick in Maryland.
Okay, let's unpack Murray Thompson.
Yeah.
Because his background is absolutely crucial to understanding his perspective. During the war, he was tasked with analyzing biological threats to the U.S. mainland.
He knew what was possible.
Specifically, he was investigating these strange, massive paper balloon bombs that the Japanese military were launching across the Pacific Ocean, hoping the jet stream would carry them to America.
The Fugo balloon bombs.
Thompson was terrified of these balloons. He knew the Japanese had already successfully used plague and anthrax against civilian populations in China, and he was convinced these balloons were going to drop biological weapons on American cities, killing livestock and sparking massive, uncontrollable epidemics.
He intimately knew exactly what the Japanese military was capable of when it came to biological terror.
So immediately following the surrender, Thompson is dispatched to Tokyo by Escafisi, the supreme commander for the Allied powers, which is General MacArthur's headquarters.
His mission is explicit and highly classified. Find out exactly what the Japanese biological warfare program was doing, identify who was running it, and secure all of that data for the United States.
Secure the data for the U.S.
But when he arrives, eager to investigate, he is immediately and expertly stonewalled. He is assigned a Japanese liaison named Dr. Naito, who basically acts as a perfectly polite, impenetrable brick wall.
Just managing him.
Naito smiles, he bows deeply, he takes Thompson to fancy dinners at the Daiichi Hotel, but he feeds him absolutely nothing but lies. He continually claims that all Japanese research was purely defensive in nature, just looking for vaccines.
Thompson is getting increasingly frustrated by the bureaucracy, but then the breakthrough finally happens.
Mm-hmm.
Late one night in his hotel room at the Daiichi, he hears a scratching sound at the window.
Straight out of a spy novel.
A Japanese man who turns out to be a former biological warfare engineer, desperate for protection, literally crawls up the exterior water pipe and slips into his room. He hands Thompson a physical document.
The smoking gun.
It's the highly classified blueprint for something called the Uji bomb, a porcelain bomb designed to drop plague-infected fleas. And this informant drops an absolute bombshell that changes everything.
The scale of it is horrifying.
He tells Thompson about a sprawling secret facility called Ping Fan, located in Manchuria. He says it was run by a covert military group known as Unit 731, commanded by a man named Lieutenant General Shiro Ishii.
The atrocities committed at Pingfan, as revealed in the text of these letters, are beyond horrifying, but they are crucial to the context of the cover-up.
We have to mention them to understand Thompson's reaction.
Unit 731 wasn't doing defensive research. They were conducting lethal, systematic human experiments on a massive scale. The informant details how they tied living prisoners to stakes at varying distances and detonated bombs loaded with plague and anthrax just to measure the infectivity radius.
It's just pure evil.
And then the informant reveals the specific detail that completely shatters Thompson's worldview. The prisoners they used as guinea pigs weren't just Chinese civilians or Russian spies, they were American prisoners of war.
Thompson is a medical doctor. He took the Hippocratic Oath. He fundamentally believes in the sanctity of human life and the ethics of medicine. When he hears this, he is physically sickened.
It breaks him.
He takes the evidence and goes straight to the very top. To General MacArthur and the head of U.S. military intelligence, General Charles Willoughby, Thompson lays it all out and says, "We have to prosecute them. We have the evidence. We have to try Shiro Ishii and his men as war criminals at the Tokyo trials immediately."
He expects them to be as outraged as he is.
But the reaction from his superiors is completely chilling. They aren't surprised. They aren't outraged, because they already know. And they coldly tell Thompson to keep quiet and drop the investigation.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the impending Cold War, the horrific, calculated reality of the situation becomes clear.
And again, we are just analyzing the historical decisions presented in the source text.
U.S. intelligence doesn't want to hang Shiro Ishii. They desperately want his data. They are terrified of the rising power of the Soviet Union, and they believe Ishii's years of human experimentation, which is data the U.S. could never legally or ethically gather themselves without facing global condemnation, is an invaluable strategic asset for the coming conflict.
The ultimate cynical calculus.
Thompson is stonewalled by his own people, but he eventually discovers the ultimate betrayal, a secret agreement known as the Kamakura Conference.
The Kamakura Conference. This is the exact pivot point where the localized true crime becomes a massive global cover-up.
The focal point of the conspiracy.
According to Thompson's informant, the Americans held a highly secret meeting in the coastal town of Kamakura with Ishii and the top scientists of Unit 731. They sat across the table and struck a deal.
A literal deal with the devil.
The United States granted absolute blanket immunity from any war crimes prosecution to all members of Unit 731. In exchange, the scientists handed over every single piece of their biological warfare data, their slides, and their research. They literally got away with mass murder sanctioned by the victors.
And this is exactly where Thompson, sitting in his room reviewing the files, connects the dots back to the Teikoku Bank incident.
It all comes together.
Thompson realizes the horrifying, inescapable truth. The killer at the bank used a highly sophisticated, difficult-to-synthesize poison. He administered it with absolute military precision. He confidently disguised himself as a public health official.
Right.
He even referred to the liquids as first drug and second drug in English. The methodology, the cold detachment, the specific terminology, it's exactly how Unit 731 operated in the field.
It's their exact playbook.
Thompson deduces that the bank poisoner is almost certainly a former member of Unit 731 out in the occupied city, calmly testing his poisons on Japanese civilians for his own purposes, or perhaps acting as a contractor for a pharmaceutical company.
But the U.S. military cannot intervene. Because if they step in, if they catch the real killer, and it is revealed to the public that he is a former member of Unit 731, the entire secret immunity deal from the Kamakura conference will be exposed to the world.
It would be a global scandal.
The Soviets would find out and use it as massive propaganda. The American public would find out that their own government pardoned men who brutally experimented on American POWs. The political fallout would be catastrophic.
So they do nothing.
So the U.S. military makes a calculated decision to stay entirely silent. They watch from the shadows. They let the desperate Japanese police bumble around in the dark and eventually frame Hirasawa, an innocent painter, because throwing Hirasawa to the wolves perfectly protects their geopolitical secret.
The ultimate tragedy of the fourth candle is the fate of Thompson himself. He is a man destroyed by his own conscience. He is sidelined by his superiors. His official reports are buried or heavily altered to remove any mentions of human experimentation, and he eventually contracts severe tuberculosis.
The stress just eats away at him physically.
He is left dying in a bed at St. Luke's Hospital, physically rotting away, completely consumed by guilt over what his country has done. He writes these final, paranoid, desperate letters to his wife, realizing that he was nothing more than a pawn that he was played from the very beginning.
It's a miserable end.
In his fever, he hears rats scurrying in the walls of the hospital, which he views as the vengeful ghosts of the plague victims coming for him, and he dies a broken, isolated man. He leaves his letters behind as a desperate warning. The official history you are being told is a meticulously constructed lie.
It is incredibly, overwhelmingly bleak. And that profound darkness leads us directly to the final candle of our deep dive, the fifth candle. We move away from the high-level geopolitical maneuvering and plunge back into the muddy streets of Tokyo, descending into pure, unadulterated psychological horror.
We meet a very interesting character here.
We meet a man named Shimizu Kogoro, who proudly calls himself the occult detective.
Shimizu is an absolutely fascinating, deeply disturbing character to read. He represents the macro-level trauma and the sheer madness of occupied Tokyo distilled into one person.
He is the city's trauma made flesh.
He operates his detective agency out of a cramped office in the Nagasaki Shrine. He is a completely amateur detective with no official standing, but he is fiercely obsessive. He is injecting himself with Hiropun, which is a brand name for methamphetamine that was widely available post-war, up to 6 times a day, just to stay awake and keep hunting.
6 times a day.
He maps the locations of the crimes using bizarre astrology, frantically searching for what he calls the 6 points to his evil star.
He is completely unhinged, vibrating with drug-induced paranoia.
Right.
But you make a great point. Shimizu isn't just a random character. He's a walking metaphor for the deep sickness of the city itself.
Right.
He firmly believes Tokyo is literally physically cursed by the restless dead. The text specifically mentions his obsession with the 88,243 spirits of the war dead imprisoned at the Yasukuni Shrine.
He sees the spiritual rot.
Shimizu believes that Teikoku bank poisoning isn't just a standard physical crime committed by a man for money. He views it as a symptom of a much deeper spiritual sickness that is actively infecting a defeated, traumatized, and occupied nation. To him, an evil magic has taken over the capital.
And in his desperate, drug-fueled, manic quest to stop this perceived evil magic, Shimizu makes a terrifying, irreversible decision. He decides that the only possible way to catch a demon is to essentially become a demon himself.
This is where it gets crazy.
He wants to become the killer's literal doppelganger to draw him out. So he meticulously alters his appearance. He cuts his hair short. He dyes it a distinguished gray. He literally tattoos 2 small brown spots onto his left cheek to perfectly match the survivor's description of the suspect.
He tattoos his own face.
He buys a brown lounge suit, a specific spring raincoat, and a pair of burnt orange rubber boots. He sews himself a white armband that proudly says leader of the disinfecting team. He physically, painstakingly transforms himself into the exact mirror image of the Teikoku bank killer.
He becomes the monster to fight the monster. It paints such a visceral, chilling picture. You just imagine him wandering at the dark, ruined streets at night, incredibly high on meth, looking exactly like the man who murdered 12 innocent people, genuinely thinking this is how he will solve the case.
It's pure madness.
It's a brilliant, horrifying literary metaphor. In the desperate, unrelenting search for truth and justice in a fundamentally corrupt, broken world, the investigators themselves become infected by the very madness and evil they are trying to stop.
The abyss stares back.
Detective H, who coldly framed Hirasawa, became a monster bureaucracy. The American Dr. Thompson, who helped cover up Unit 73, won by silence, became complicit in monstrous acts. And Shimizu literally, physically turns himself into the monster.
It perfectly encapsulates the entire thematic thrust of the source material. What starts as a localized, horrific true crime poisoning in a small bank branch expands rapidly outward like a contagion.
It infects everything it touches.
It becomes a biting critique of the Japanese police system's desperate, unyielding need to close a case to save face, regardless of what the actual truth is. It becomes a harrowing, intimate look at the lifelong, isolating agony of survival in a society that wants to forget.
And the global implications.
And finally, it reveals a massive, deeply cynical geopolitical cover-up involving biological warfare where the U.S. military coldly prioritizes strategic data over human justice.
It is an absolute dizzying journey. David Peace takes the true crime genre, breaks it over his knee, and shatters it into 100 pieces. And the way he uses that avant-garde ghost story structure,
Right.
the Haiku Monogatari Kaidankai, it allows him to convey something that a straightforward dry history book simply cannot capture.
Exactly. It conveys the raw, visceral feeling of living in a society where the truth has been deliberately systematically fractured.
You feel the disorientation.
When the authorities, both the local police and the supreme occupying powers, are actively burying the truth for their own ends, reality itself becomes ghost-like and untethered. The victims become literal ghosts weeping in the mud, constantly asking if they even matter.
The survivors lose their minds.
The survivors are haunted by unending nightmares, unable to trust a simple cup of tea. The whistleblowers die paranoid, isolated, and ignored. The entire structure of the novel makes you, the reader, deeply feel the disorientation, the cold, and the horror of a world where justice is nothing more than a convenient fiction written by the powerful.
Which leaves you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over as we watch the little last candle burn down and wrap up this deep dive.
The takeaway.
We've seen exactly how the official accepted historical record of the Teikoku Bank incident was built. It was built solidly on the coerced and heavily biased testimony of desperate detectives.
Yes.
It was built directly over the buried, ignored letters of guilty, dying whistleblowers. And it was built by completely callously ignoring the clear voices of the traumatized survivors who actually knew the truth.
They were just silenced.
So as you go about your day today looking at the news or reading a history book, ask yourself, how much of the history we casually accept as absolute fact today is actually just a successfully executed cover-up? How many hidden ghosts are waiting quietly in the dark for their candles to finally be lit? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material.